Hello and a very good evening. You're watching the news at 6 on Rajya Sabha television with me, Frank Pereira. Here are the headlines. 122 nations back United Nations decision to adopt first ever global treaty to ban nuclear weapons. India, 8 other nuclear armed nations, including US, China and Pakistan, skip negotiations. Enforcement Directorate officials search properties owned by RJD Chief Lalu Prasad's daughter, Meesa Bharti, question her husband Shailesh Kumar in Delhi over charges of money laundering. Clashes break out between security forces and protesters in Pulwama district of Jammu and Kashmir. Curfew clamped in 3 towns as Valley marks first anniversary of killing of Hizbul Mujahideen militant Burhan Wani. And tension erupts in Darjeeling once again after a Gorkha National Liberation Front supporter is found dead. Angry protesters set traffic police booth on fire, felled stones at policemen. Well, the United Nations has voted to adopt the first ever global treaty to ban nuclear weapons. The vote was backed by 122 nations. However, India and 8 other nuclear-armed nations, including the US, China and Pakistan, did not participate in the negotiations, which is a legally binding instrument to prohibit atomic weapons.
This process enjoyed the overwhelming support of the international community. More than 130 states participated in the conference, and over 100 non-governmental organizations participated as well. Needless to say that the presence of the victims of the atomic bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki and those also affected by nuclear testings throughout the world has been of vital importance for all the delegations.
The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons was adopted on Friday by a vote of 122 in favor to 1 against and 1 abstention. India, the United States, Russia, Britain, China, France, Pakistan, North Korea and Israel did not participate in the negotiations. The treaty will be open for signature to all states at UN headquarters in September and enter into force 90 days after it has been ratified by at least 50 countries. In October last year, more than 120 nations had voted to negotiate the legally binding agreement to prohibit nuclear weapons, eventually leading to the total elimination. India had abstained from voting on the resolution too. In its explanation of vote given for abstention on the resolution, India had said it was not convinced that the proposed conference could address the long-standing expectation of the international community for a comprehensive instrument on nuclear disarmament. India also maintained that the Geneva-based conference on disarmament is the single multilateral disarmament negotiation forum. Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi today asked British Prime Minister Theresa May to help extradite liquor baron Vijay Mallya to India. Modi met Theresa May on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Hamburg. He requested her to facilitate legal requirements from Britain to speed up the extradition process. The extradition request for Mallya is being processed by the courts in UK, although the British State Department has said that it has accepted the Indian request. Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi today held talks with Italian Prime Minister Paolo Gentiloni and South Korean President Moon Jae-in. The bilateral meetings took place on the sidelines of the G20 summit in the German port city of Hamburg. Modi also held similar meetings with state heads of Mexico, Argentina, the UK and Vietnam. On Friday, Modi held bilaterals with Japan's Shinzo Abe and Canada's Justin Trudeau. Prime Minister Modi invited South Korean President to visit India and also accepted the invitation in return. Modi's discussions with Gentiloni focused on promoting bilateral relations, particularly trade and investment and people-to-people ties. The Italian Prime Minister appreciated Indian investments in his country, including those in the industrial sector. They discussed possibilities of cooperation in Africa for development of the African nations. Well, joining me for a chat right now is our correspondent Akhilesh Suman. Well, Akhilesh, hectic parley is going on there on the sidelines of the G20 summit. Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting several heads of states.
Yeah, naturally, this is the time when Prime Minister gets an opportunity, and any head of government of any nation gets an opportunity to have a dialogue on issues of mutual importance and also international importance. And Prime Minister Modi is, that he is quite conversant on such an occasions when he chooses to meet the allies in a very different way, and he has met Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. That is one of the most important meetings of the day. And that India and Japan has vowed earlier that they will have a good investment cooperation, but that investment is not coming for a long time. And everyone is raising fingers that what Japan thinks to do, even when Japan is threatened. Actually, the whole Southeast Asia is threatened by Chinese hegemonistic attitudes. So Prime Minister has, to my sources, is telling that Prime Minister has asked Japan's Prime Minister to make such a investment climate between India and Japan, so that one can match the investment, one can match the whole development scenario in the whole South Asian region. And that Japan, US and India are going into Malabar exercise, and that will also be signaling to Chinese monopolistic attitude in this area. So this is one of the most important meetings today. And also it happened because South Korean president also made Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He is recently elected, and Prime Minister invited him to come to India, and both wants to be conversant on issues of mutual importance, rather more than UNSC, because United Nations Security Council is one of the areas where India and South Korea has lots of differences, even when on economic and financial issues both are together. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi had some talks, and they will have major talks when President of South Korea comes to India on this occasion. I know that Prime Minister was talking to Italy on the major issues of cooperation in Africa, because Italy is also one of the most important investors in Africa, and India also wants some sort of collaboration with other countries. So I think that Italy and India also agrees to collaborate in Africa for development issues. Frank.
Indeed, as far as Africa is concerned, Akhilesh, it clearly looks like Africa is on top of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's agenda. He was in talks with Japan as well to launch this corridor there to ensure that the look towards Africa policy itself is put in place.
Yeah, naturally, because this is one of the major issues of not only India, but also the whole G20 has made a separate session on cooperation on Africa, because you see, Africa is one of the regions which is not only least developed, but also there are so many of infights inside the nations, are also a bit of competition, rather negative competition among the different countries for exploiting the natural resources of Africa. And in this competition, people of Africans have been suffered. So it was a long due, and all the major economies of the world, that is G20, they have sat together, and they wanted to take this issue forward, that human development is much more important than Africa. Social development and economic development on African terms is much more important than just extracting the mines and just extracting the mineral resources. Indeed. And that is why Prime Minister was very keen. And that India is very much into the soft training of the African people, and that is why India is revered in African nations, that it doesn't go just for mining, also try to increase the capability of Africans. Correct.
All right, Akhilesh Suman, we'll have to leave to that. Thank you so much for joining us there with all those details and putting things into perspective for us. Moving on now, of course, the Enforcement Directorate on Saturday conducted searches at RJD party leader Meesa Bharti's residence. Her husband, Shailesh Kumar, was also brought in for questioning in connection with a Benami land deal case involving over 1,000 crore rupees.
Enforcement Directorate officers on Saturday searched properties owned by RJD Chief Lalu Prasad's daughter Meesa Bharti and detained her husband Shailesh Kumar in Delhi. Farmhouses in Ghitorni, Bijwasan and Sainik Farms in New Delhi came under scrutiny over charges of money laundering case involving shell companies.
वो बताए ना कि आखिर मिशेल पैकर्स को कि जो बंद पड़ी कंपनी थी उसके 10 रुपए के शेयर को वीरेंद्र जैन सुरेंद्र जैन ने 100 रुपए में क्यों खरीदा और उससे जो करीब 1.25 करोड़ रुपया आया उससे 26 पालन फार्म बीजवासन में 2 एकड़ जमीन खरीदी गई। उनको जवाब देना पड़ेगा ना।
Searches were also carried out against Michelle Packers and Printers, in which Bharti, an MP, and her husband are directors. The ED probe is based on a charge sheet filed by the Serious Fraud Investigation Office against Surendra and his brother Virendra Jain.
I don't consider these raids of IT, ED or CBI because the names change. The modus operandi remain the same. It is actually a new kind of politics which the 11 Ashok Road, BJP and RSS, they have fine-tuned it. Now they don't wish to fight their political opponents politically. They know they are not likely to succeed. So what do you do? You take cover of these agencies and try to create a different kind of scenario. You wish to trouble us through these mechanisms.
The agency found that 1.2 lakh shares of Michelle Packers and Printers were bought during the year 2007 and 8 at 100 rupees per share unit, allegedly by 4 shell companies. These companies were allegedly controlled by the Jains. The Michelle shares were later allegedly bought back by Bharti at 1/10 the rate, 10 rupees per unit.
कानून अपनी जगह पे है, वो कानून अपना काम करेगा। केवल आरोप लगाने से नहीं, केवल FIR दर्ज करने से नहीं, बल्कि उसकी जांच, पूरे सबूत इकट्ठे करके फिर न्यायिक प्रक्रिया से उसको गुजरना होगा और उसके बाद जो निर्णय होगा वो अंतिम निर्णय होता है।
The Jains purportedly disclosed their modus operandi was to receive cash in advance and invest it as share premium in the companies of the beneficiaries. Subsequently, the shares would be later sold back to the directors or close relatives of beneficiaries at a huge discount. Michelle Packers and Printers was registered at the address 25 Tughlaq Road, then occupied by the RJD chief. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Well, Jammu and Kashmir witnessed complete shutdown on Saturday in response to a call by separatists to mark the death anniversary of Hizbul Mujahideen militant Burhan Wani. The separatists called on people to march towards Tral, hometown of Wani. Police patrolling was stepped up in various parts of Srinagar to maintain law and order.
Clashes broke out between security forces and protesters in Pulwama district of Jammu and Kashmir on Saturday as the valley marked the first anniversary of the killing of Hizbul Mujahideen terrorist Burhan Wani. Police fired tear gas when protesters pelted stones at them. Streets were a deserted look in Srinagar as authorities clamped curfew in 3 towns, including Tral, the hometown of Wani, after separatist leaders called for a week of demonstrations. Shops and business establishments remained closed. Restrictions were imposed on the movement of people in the rest of the valley.
वहाँ हालत ठीक है। अभी मैं डीजी साहब से बात हुई है। एक जगह थोड़ा फायरिंग हुई है। आर्मी के एक कैप्टन और 2 जवानों को थोड़े जख्मी हुए हैं, लेकिन बड़े सख्ती से हम निपट रहे हैं और लोग जो हैं इनको सपोर्ट नहीं कर रहे। सरकार ने जो रिस्ट्रिक्शंस जरूर लगाई हैं, लेकिन लोगों की तरफ से इनको सपोर्ट नहीं है कि लोग वहाँ की शांति चाहते हैं।
Police and paramilitary personnel were deployed in strength across Kashmir. Internet services remained suspended even as schools postponed examinations.
आज की परिस्थिति को देखकर ये हमें समझना चाहिए कि बुरहान वानी के लिए बहुत समर्थन है वादी में। साथ साथ जिनको हम अलगावादी कहते हैं, हुर्रियत के लोग, जिनसे प्रधानमंत्री मनमोहन सिंह हो या प्रधानमंत्री वाजपेयी हो, उन्होंने समझ लिया था और इसलिए उनसे उन्होंने संपर्क रखा।
It is unfortunate. It also shows the double speak of the Congress party, and the onus is on them to show that they are one with the government and with humanity in their voice of condemning terror and backing action against terror.
The Amarnath Yatra was suspended from Jammu due to the law and order situation in the Kashmir Valley, which is under curfew. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Well, Pakistan once again violated the ceasefire along the line of control in Poonch district of Jammu and Kashmir on Saturday. 2 civilians were killed in the firing from across the border.
The Pakistani army violated ceasefire again on Saturday, killing 2 civilians and injuring a few others. The Pak army resorted to mortar shelling and fired at forward posts and villages along the LOC in Jammu and Kashmir's Poonch district.
जो हमारे गांव के लोग हैं वो इतने घबरा गए हैं कि ऐसा हालात बन रहे हैं कि लोग काफ़ी इसमें मतलब सहमे हुए हैं। तो हमारी यही गुजारिश होगी गवर्नमेंट से कि गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया से, और क्योंकि हमारे जो बॉर्डर के लोग हैं ये यही चाहते हैं कि अगर इस तरह से रोज़ फायरिंग से एक बार अगर फायर हो जाए तो ज़्यादा अच्छा रहेगा। तो हम यही चाहते हैं, हमारा पूरा हिंदुस्तान अब यही चाहता है कि पाकिस्तान अगर जिस तरह से सीज़फायर वायलेशन कर रहा है इसको इसी के को सबक सिखाना चाहिए।
यहाँ हमारे घर के सामने जो है फायरिंग आज बहुत ज़ोर से हो रही है। तो मैं भी सुबह, पाकिस्तान ने सुबह 6:30 बजे तकरीबन शुरुआत की है फायरिंग की। तो अब जो है ये दोनों तरफ से फायर चल रही है, इधर से भी चल रही है, वहाँ से भी। तो काफ़ी हद तक लोग परेशान हैं।
The firing from across the border was unprovoked and indiscriminate, using small arms, automatic weapons and mortars. Indian troops also retaliated effectively.
हमारी तरफ से जो रेस्क्यू टीम है और ग्राउंड पे हमारे हेल्थ या दूसरी जो मैन पावर और मिशनरी है दैट्स अवेलेबल, और कोई भी इवेंचुअलिटी अगर फर्दर होती है तो वी विल टेक इमीडिएट एक्शन एंड रेडिस एंड वी विल डील इट वेरी इफेक्टिवली।
In June alone, there have been 23 incidents of ceasefire violations by Pakistan, an attack by Pakistan's Special Forces team and 2 infiltration bids. 4 people, including 3 Jawans, were killed and 12 were injured. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, it's time for a short break now, but news and updates will continue on the other side. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
फरवरी 1940 में ब्रिटिश इंडियन आर्मी की बलोच रेजिमेंट की 5वीं पलटन ज्वाइन की। हिंदुस्तानी सिपाहियों ने जापानीज का बहुत बहादुरी से मुकाबला किया और उन्हें जापानीज के हवाले कर दिया गया। हिंदुस्तान और अंग्रेजों के बीच एक धागा था, वो टूट गया। गद्दारी की कोई माफी नहीं होगी।
You are charged with Indian Army Act Section 41, waging war against the king.
जब अंग्रेजी अफसरों ने साडी हिफाजत नहीं की, तो वो हमारी वफादारी के हकदार किस तरह हो सकते हैं? अगर जिंदा बचा उसके बाद शादी करोगी मुझसे?
Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha television. Well, the army was redeployed in Darjeeling after fresh violence broke out at Sonada. Gorkhaland supporters torched a police outpost in a train station after a youth was killed in alleged police firing last night. West Bengal Chief Minister appealed to lift the shutdown and said that the state government is open to dialogue.
Tensions deepening in Darjeeling, where the indefinite strike for a separate state entered its 24th day on Saturday. Columns of the army comprising around 100 personnel were deployed in Sonada and Darjeeling as protests escalated after a young man's body was found with a bullet wound. Locals claim the man, Tashi Bhutia, was shot dead by police around midnight in Sonada, 15 kilometers from Darjeeling.
We condemn this incident of brutal police firing on an innocent and an unarmed Gorkhaland supporter.
Angry Gorkhaland supporters marched with the body, raised slogans and torched a police outpost in Sonada, forcing security personnel to fire tear gas shells to bring the situation under control. The GJM and other hill parties have lodged a police complaint accusing the police of killing the youth. West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee appealed to the agitators to withdraw the shutdown and said the government was open for dialogue. She also accused the centre of non-cooperation with the state and said that timely deployment of the Central Reserve Forces in the hills could have prevented the crisis.
I will appeal again to maintain the peace. Let us withdraw the band. Allow the people to take their food. Let us students to start their school, colleges, education all. Negotiation is a part and process of the democratic system. So I'll be happy to talk. I have no problem. But let the peace first restore.
With food supply severely hit due to the indefinite strike, the GJM and various NGOs distributed food. Barring medicine outlets, all shops, schools, colleges remained closed and internet services remained suspended. The police and security forces patrolled the streets and kept a vigil on the entry and exit routes. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, let's now take a look at some other developments from across the country and nationwide. The Maharashtra state government has decided to suspend helicopter travel for all VIPs until a probe is conducted into Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis near miss at Alibag. A high-power committee headed by Chief Secretary Sumit Malik decided to suspend helicopter travel hours after a private chopper unexpectedly took off just seconds before the Chief Minister was about to board it, after guards pulled him away from the chopper's spinning blades. In Karnataka, tension gripped Dakshina Kannada district as the RSS activist who was brutally stabbed on his neck by bike-borne miscreants on July 4th succumbed to his injuries on Friday. Earlier in the day, a high-powered protest led by BJP MP Shobha Karandaje and Nalin Kumar Katil was also held against the stabbing of RSS activist Sharat Madiwala. Prohibitory orders have been extended till July 11th in Dakshina Kannada district. Tension continues in West Bengal's Basirhat, adjoining riot-hit areas of North 24 Parganas. BJP leaders Meenakshi Lekhi, Om Mathur and Satyapal Singh were detained near Kolkata while trying to reach the district. This is the second day in a row when politicians were prevented from visiting the riot-hit region. Well, the US and Russia struck an agreement on Friday on a ceasefire in Syria. The ceasefire goes into effect Sunday at noon Damascus time. The US said that the understanding is designed to reduce violence in the area. On Saturday, Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Turkish counterpart Tayyip Erdogan also held a bilateral meeting on the sidelines of the G20 and discussed the Syrian crisis. The two leaders also praised the joint efforts in the peace process.
В значительной степени благодаря вашей компетенции удалось существенным образом к лучшему изменить ситуацию в Сирии. И террористическим формированием удар значительно нанесен за это время, и урегулирование продвинулось серьезным образом.
Hepsinden öte tabii Suriye, Irak bununla ilgili bölgedeki beklentiler çok yüksek. Ben görüşümüzü o bakımdan da çok önemsiyorum. Ve şu ana kadar da koyduğunuz iradeye şahsım ve milletim adına teşekkür ederim.
Let's now take a look at some more developments from across the globe in Global Buzz. Iraqi security forces in Mosul stand prepared to take full control of the city. Armored vehicles and fighters moved through the streets of Islamic State's final bastion in the country. Iraqi commanders said the insurgents are fighting with snipers, grenades and suicide bombers in the densely populated maze of narrow alleyways. UNESCO added Hebron and two adjoined shrines, the Jewish tomb of the Patriarchs and the Muslim Ibrahimi Mosque, to the endangered World Heritage List. The Palestinians hailed the decision, even as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called it delusional. An Islamic militant triggered a suicide car blast in a remote Egyptian army outpost in the Sinai Peninsula. The assault killed at least 23 soldiers in the deadliest attack in the region in 2 years. In an online statement, the Islamic State said it carried out the attack as the Egyptian army was preparing an assault on its positions in Sinai. Rafael Nadal, Andy Murray and Roberto, along with Venus Williams and Victoria Azarenka, have entered the top 16 of the Wimbledon Championships. Rafael Nadal stormed through the third round at Wimbledon with a straight sets victory of 6-1, 6-4, 7-6 over Karen Khachanov to reach the last 16. Andy Murray came through a thrilling encounter against Italian showman Fabio Fognini to book his spot in the fourth round. Spain's Roberto Bautista Agut also reached the fourth round with a shock victory over Japanese 9th seed Kei Nishikori. Veteran American tennis player Venus Williams saw off the challenge of Japanese teenager Naomi Osaka in the third round. The American made a break of serve in the second set to win the match 7-6, 6-4. Along with the Williams, Victoria Azarenka extended her Grand Slam comeback into the second week by beating Heather Watson 3-6, 6-1, 6-4. Well, that's it on this newscast. Have a good evening.